the Democrats want to die on the hill of we need more foreign aid workers and we need more waste, fraud, and abuse and more government employees, have at it, guys. I don't know if this message is resonating with the average American.
I think you and I can both agree that if these folks are committing fraud, that is a serious crime, probably the most serious crime that you could commit. And I mean, anybody who is committing fraud would obviously be charged, tried, convicted. And so can you explain to me how we've been hearing this talking point about fraud, all this fraud is getting eliminated over and over and over again, and yet not a single charge has been filed. So if there's all this fraud that Elon Musk is tweeting about on a daily basis, that Fox is hosting interviews to discuss, where are the charges?
In this video, Brian Tyler Cohen debates, I use air quotes around that word, Tomi Lahren about, in this clip, they're talking about Elon Musk, everybody's favorite, richest man alive, who is currently under the hood of our government, ripping out wires and tubes and assuring us that it's all for the best. So we'll just take his word for that. I'm going to watch this with you. I'm going to have opinions. I'm going to do my best to hold my tongue because I think they fight pretty well for themselves. And then I want to know what you think in the comments. But without further ado, why don't we get into it?
Alien. If Democrats want to stand in the way of that and they want to tell their constituents, hey, vote for us in the midterms, vote for us in 2028, we'll make sure that the criminal aliens come back. Far be it for me to stand in your way. Continue that message. Best of luck with it.
And if Republicans want to run on, hey, we can disappear you with no due process, far be it for me to stand in your way. If Republicans want to turn the United States into Russia, where we disappear political opponents with zero due process, sending them to foreign gulags somewhere, if that's really what you're running on, behind the banner of the Party of Law and Order, be my guest.
All right, I don't think we're going to get together on that one, but let's talk finally with Brian Tyler Cohen and Tomi Lahren about Elon Musk. His move to cut government waste has gotten about as much attention as anything in Washington. This week, he lowered Doge's projected savings to $150 billion. Brian, how do you think the Doge experiment is working?
Well, I think the fact that he's gone from $1 trillion in savings down to $150 billion in savings, I'm not great at math, but it sounds like an 85% reduction, if I have that correct. Correct me if I'm wrong.
But isn't that better than nothing? It's still a lot of money, $150 billion.
If there is legitimate waste, fraud, and abuse, then be my guest. I'll be the first in line to sign up to eliminate it. But the reality is that if all you have to do is look at the very first targets of Elon Musk's Doge Commission to show where his priorities actually are, we all know that the one agency in the federal government that is more bloated than any other agency there is the Department of Defense, is the Pentagon, right? Failed 7 audits, ripe for something like the Doge Commission to go in and root out all that waste, fraud, and abuse. Can't even pass an audit. Hasn't been able to do so for the better part of a decade. And yet, what did Elon go after first? USAID, 0.5% of the budget that delivers clean water and food to people who need it in impoverished countries, that delivers HIV prevention, that affords America soft power around the entire globe so that we can expressly keep China from getting a foothold in a lot of these places across the world. That's what he went after, which just so happened to be investigating Starlink. He went after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which would have had oversight over Elon's efforts to turn X into some payment processing system, went after the EPA, which of course has regulatory authority over Tesla, went after the Department of Labor, went after the National Labor Relations Board. All of these agencies that Elon's gone after just so happen to either be regulating him, imposing fines on him, having some oversight onto him, and those are the ones that were gutted at his hands. And yet, meanwhile, it took God knows how long for him to look at the Department of Defense, and yet we just found out that the DoD's budget is not decreasing, but increasing if Donald Trump gets his way to $1 trillion.
Tomi, your thoughts? I mean, there's a whole lot of people that support the military.
Yeah. And again, our Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, who happens to be a personal friend of mine, has opened up the DOD and said, hey, Elon, if you can find ways to cut waste, fraud, and abuse here, please have at it. Doesn't mean at the expense of our national security. And I'd also like to add, for those Democrats that love to use this talking point of the Department of Defense and how we need to cut there, they're the same folks that want us to prop up Ukraine in perpetuity. So again, if you want to end endless wars, I'm right on board with you on that one. Let's save some money, but not at the expense of our national security. Security. I also say this, if you're cutting 150, if you're cutting $1 billion, boy, what would LA do with $1 billion to rebuild after those catastrophic LA wildfires that your mayor was MIA during, right? I think that $1 billion would go a long way to a lot of folks. But when you're looking at cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, no stone has been left unturned here. Elon and his team have gone through, and there was a fantastic interview with these folks of Doge with our own Brett Baer, and they said very simply, we're cutting the waste, we're cutting the fraud, we're cutting the abuse, we're not cutting Social Security, we're cutting the fraud out of Social Security. People that haven't been born yet, or people that have been dead for 20 years, people that are calling in and taking other people's benefits. That's what we're going after. So again, if the Democrats want to die on the hill of we need more foreign aid workers and we need more waste, fraud, and abuse and more government employees, have at it, guys. I don't know if this message is resonating with the average American.
I think you and I can both agree that if these folks are committing fraud, that is a serious crime, probably the most serious crime that you could commit. And I mean, anybody who is committing fraud would obviously be charged, tried, convicted. And so can you explain to me how we've been hearing this talking point about fraud, all this fraud is getting eliminated over and over and over again, and yet not a single charge has been filed. So if there's all this fraud that Elon Musk is tweeting about on a daily basis, that Fox is hosting interviews to discuss, where are the charges?
I can't wait for those charges to come down. As you know, it takes a little while to formally charge somebody, but first you identify it, you identify the problem.
Well, you also Brian, I mean, to that point, Brian, you heard about all President Trump's issues coming at the beginning of the Biden administration. Then it took years for there to be charges against him. A lot of Democrats felt like that took way too long. But, I mean, that is part of the way the Department of Justice works, right?
Whoa, let's hang on there, Haircut. There's a couple of major differences there. First of all, the Trump and his lawyers are known, like, they'll do every legal trick they can to avoid taking, responsibility for anything. So if you're prosecuting them, it is in your best interest to build as airtight a case as possible. And that takes a lot of due diligence. I think as the Democrats, and certainly me, the left, a lot of people felt that it did take way too long, right? It took way too long. They could have brought some of those charges earlier. And Trump's, one of his major tools that he uses is to run out the clock, delay. So, but to sort of be like, I love this administration and like Tomi Lahren's as a representative, a pro person of this administration is saying, well, we need a little time. Right. I mean, I think that, the deliberative nature of the current Trump, come on. They're not taking time with anything else. They're deporting innocent people. They're accidentally firing nuclear scientists. They are cutting Ebola research and having to scramble to hire them back. They're putting out a buyout letter to FAA people when there's already an understaffing issue at the FAA, right? This is not an administration that bothers to measure twice before it cuts. So believe me, and it's a punitive administration. They're going right after lawyers. They're going right after college students. They're going right after anybody that they think isn't on their team, and they're calling them traitors and terrorists. There's no evidence of that. They're not waiting on any due diligence in that regard. But, when it comes to the fraud we found, we need to be very careful. It's going to take some time. Please.
Well, I truly hope that we can have this discussion again once we finally get these elusive fraud charges that we've been hearing so much about, to the tune of billions and billions of dollars, thousands of people presumably or reportedly getting all of these Social Security benefits that are 100, 200, 300 years old. So I would love to come back and have that discussion once we finally get those elusive fraud charges filed.
Okay, and Tomi, real quickly though, I mean, there's bloat in the Department of Defense. No, I mean, it's one of the most bloated organizations there is.
Oh, listen, you're not going to get any argument from me about bloat in the federal government in general. There's a lot of areas that we can cut, certainly, and I have no issue with that. Of course, I don't want to downgrade our military capabilities. Right. I think we certainly need to have money for that, no doubt, because of all the wars started under the Biden administration. But yes, I'm completely open to cutting wherever you can cut. If there's redundancies, if there's waste, there's fraud, there's abuse, there's money being spent on furniture for buildings that nobody's showing up to, let's cut it. And the alternative alternative here, I know the Democrats are so up in arms about this, but the alternative is what we have been doing, which is we're not going to look for the waste, fraud, and abuse, or even if we do look for it, we're going to turn a blind eye. We're not actually going to cut it out. Both parties are obviously guilty of that. So let's identify where this waste, fraud, and abuse is, and let's cut it out. If it's $1 trillion, fantastic. If it's $150 billion, I say that's still a win in my book. Just give credit where credit's due. Maybe it'll take a little while. Again, it's been 3 months, Brian, but let's come back in 6 months and let's see what's able to get done. And then I hope that you guys are singing the praises of Elon Musk and you'll stop lighting the Teslas on fire.
Well, both of you have offered to eat crow in different ways during this debate, which means we have to come back and do it again. But as we wrap things up, though, I always like to look for areas of agreement, maybe through pop culture. So we're going to play personal issues. This is the first thing that comes to mind to you culture-wise, and see if we can find any areas of agreement in 30 seconds. Tomi Lahren, what's your favorite TV show you've watched recently?
Oh, boy, I think it'd have to be Paradise, an excellent show streaming on Hulu.
On Hulu is great. Brian?
Severance.
Okay, Severance is a good one. Tomi, what's your favorite book that you've read recently?
Oh boy. Well, I always go back to The Gift of Fear. It's a fantastic book for young ladies out there. I highly suggest everybody, especially young women, read that book by Gavin DeBecker.
And Brian?
Latest book I read that was great was Mallory McMorrow's Hate Won't Win.
And finally, Brian Tyler Cohen, if invited, would you go on Gavin Newsom's podcast?
Sure, I'll be happy to go on Gavin Newsom's podcast.
Tomi Lahren, if invited, would you go on Gavin Newsom's podcast?
Listen, I've been waiting for my invite. He follows me on X. I know he knows who I am. He knows that I read all up on Gavin Newsom. I would love to go on his vanity podcast. I'm waiting for my invite. I don't think to date he's had a female, certainly not a female conservative on. So, all right, Gavin, anytime.
I couldn't go this entire time without at least letting you get that in. So, Tomi, Brian, thank you. I hope it happens because I'd love to watch that. Either one of you would be interesting. Really appreciate both of you having a civil discussion here. I think we need more of that, and it's something that everybody else can look to in our divided times. It's important that we talk to each other. So thank you both for coming on.
I think it's interesting that he classifies this as a civil discussion. I don't really hear any discussion. They talked, they threw challenges at each other, and they responded with this very carefully considered series of talking points. Now, personally, I agree with Brian Tyler Cohen. I think that in general, the points he makes are grounded in common sense. And if they are styled to support the views of the left, then that's the environment in which the media environment in which we live now, right? Tomi Lahren, I mean, everything Tomi says to me is disingenuous. There could be some points that could be argued in there, but then I feel like she undermines it with, things like wars started under the Biden administration. Biden didn't start any wars, right? What were the wars that Biden started? He had nothing to do with the Ukraine invasion, Russia invading Ukraine. Biden didn't start that war. So if you want to talk about the U.S. involvement in Ukraine and supporting Ukraine, then I think that's a very worthwhile and in-depth conversation that could be had. But you have to look at it in terms of, what investing in that conflict on the side of Ukraine gains us against what it costs us. And again, I don't know that there is a right or obvious answer, but I think that you could have a very three-dimensional, intelligent conversation about that. That's not what's happening here. It's like, well, what about this? What about that? Right? And Tomi Lahren, of the two, it's really a series of lies strung together. Tomi Lahren is a pretty woman, and she has mastered that sort of derisive smirk that I think is so effectively triggering. She'll lay in some insults. She'll lay in some schoolyard bullying. She'll lay in some misinformation and half-truth. And she's very artful at sort of pirouetting away from the point and back to the like, I just dunked on you libs. It's like a magic spell. Listening to her talk, I imagine like the Harry Potter universe. She's weaving this like, confundus spell where it like messes up there's this dazzling cloud of like that you starts to fog your brain with all of these like 1-2 jabs and sucker punches. That's not policy. Well, that's policy in this administration, but that to me is not a legitimate argument. And she's like, give it time. It's only been 3 months. Yes, this is the administration of ponderous deliberation. This administration is rip and run. That's what this administration is. It's market manipulation. It's on track. It's careening towards authoritarianism as laid out. I mean, go ahead and read the 900 pages of Project 2025. But that is what they are desperately trying to obscure. That's what they're desperately trying to obscure with all of this, like, oh, we're deporting the illegals, we're crushing it, we found all the fraud. I love Brian Tyler Cohen's, if this is fraud, where are the charges, right? Show us the fraud. The numbers you show us are grossly inflated. It's incompetent. They're just trying to huck dirt in everyone's face, being like, no, we found it, we're saving it. We have to increase the military budget to $1 trillion because we don't want to skimp on American defense. Guess who is poised to be the biggest military contractor? If you said Elon Musk, you win. So, this unelected dude's in the White House. He's finding waste, fraud, and abuse, meanwhile receiving potentially, if it's approved, which guess what? It's probably going to be enormous new military contracts. Elon Musk, oh, what a coincidence. But we're supposed to believe that they're doing God's work in the White House, all for the American citizens. Well, it's literally a cabinet of billionaires. Come on, guys. It just defies common sense. Stop for 1 second and think about what she's saying. It's absurd. And unfortunately, the topics in there worth discussion and the potentially good points she might be making from the conservative point of view don't get dialed into because that's not what she's here to do. She's here to own the libs. Brian Tyler Cohen, I think, is pretty slick, and I think he is developing into a real powerhouse media personality. Again, I agree. I agree with his viewpoints. I just think that this ecosystem in which I am talking to you right now online, it's sort of inherently self-corrupting, right? I mean, it's so incentivized by clicks and likes and eyeballs that it drives us towards the confrontational. This video I'm doing for you right now is a perfect example. I'm hoping that a lot of you tune into this because you think, oh, Brian Tyler Cohen, Tomi Lahren. I don't even know who this Elex Michaelson is. This is the first time I've even seen him. I would rethink that suit and tie. It looks like he's not wearing pants. To me, it looks like he's sitting there in his boxer shorts and he's got like a green screen behind him of nighttime New York City or Chicago or wherever that is. Anyway, whatever. Here I am just throwing shade at this dude. Let me know what you think in the comments, folks.